Hey, this is Brandon Crawford from the San Francisco Giants, and you're listening to Torture Cast.
You're listening to a podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants.
Let's go, Giants!
With hosts Willie Dills, Chad King, Ben Lee, and Eric Nathanson. Dedicated to the greatest team in Major League Baseball, the San Francisco Giants. This is Torture Cast.
Standing on time, not gonna stop. We came to play, ain't slowing down. Falling on, we're here to stay, and we're stomping on whatever's in our way. I'm feeling like a Giant tonight.
It's Tuesday, October 2nd, 2018, and this is episode 156 of the Torture Cast, a podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. I'm your host, Chad King, and joining me today from Georgia once again is Eric Nathanson. What's up, man?
I'm just excited. Playoff baseball. It's a shame we don't have the Giants, but hey, at least we still got baseball.
Absolutely. And for those of you listening to the audio version like normal on your normal podcast feeder of any kind, just want to let you know that we're actually doing this on Facebook Live right now at the moment. You're hearing this, it's already done, but you can go ahead and check out the recorded version of the podcast. Not that there's much visual, but at least it's another medium that you can check out our podcast through on our Facebook page. So we're trying this as an experiment. For those of you not tuning into that, it's just a little webcam of me, a little picture of Eric, and some background info. But hopefully if this is a success and we deem it worthy, we'll add more content and more dynamic and interactive content, video, web pages, and other things like that into the future. But just want to let you know that we're doing this, so check us out over on Facebook for that.
Well, and I want to share the reason that Chad is on video and I'm a picture is because I just didn't want to put on pants today. So sorry, folks.
That's a very odd angle that your webcam would be at, by the way, but that's understandable. I mean, for all you know, I could be pantsless right now, you know? So, but yeah.
That was all for you, Chris. Sorry.
But yeah, I got video just in my office here of all my crap in the background. You know, I'm 44 years old, going on 45, and my bedroom or my office downstairs looks like a 14-year-old's.
It's good crap. Come on.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff. I have an old video from, the 2014 playoffs where I kind of give a tour of the office. I got all the World Series newspaper. You know, they're framed. They're up on my wall here. I got all sorts of stickers and logos. I got like 4 or 5 jerseys. A lot of cool stuff in here, but it's fun. Hey, I'm old enough to buy all this stuff and put it up. It's a good little retreat for me. But yeah, here we go, episode 156. This is all she wrote, man. The season is actually over. 162 games for the Giants have been played. And Eric, I don't know what to say, man. August 31st, they were 500. And at that point, they were out of the race, but they were 500. And they literally had the worst month of their entire franchise history. That's how bad September was.
Yeah, I wanted to go and look back. They were 5-21 in September. So conversely, they were showing yesterday the Brewers were like 21-7 during September or something, and they were like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And it just showed how bad the Giants were. Just an aside, but that 5-21, like you said, is the worst mark in franchise history for a month. Yeah. I tried to go back and look because when I saw the stat, it said "quote unquote" San Francisco history, and that's correct because they didn't start the 162 game season until 1962. Mm-hmm. And so it was really tough for the Giants to have that bad of a month before then. Like they had months in 56 and 53 where they only won 5 games, but that was April. So they went like 5-6 and 5-9 because the season started a little bit later back then. But 5-21 was just absolutely, it was so ugly to see. And I was reading Baggerly, and they had a little confab in Bochy's office before the game on Sunday between Bear and Sabian and Bochy and the beat writers because they're not doing their normal end-of-year press conference, which would usually be today, since they fired Bobby Evans. And they talked about how Sabian admitted that the Giants had basically been throwing a split squad team out there for a month. And I mean, that's why they went 5-21. I mean, you look at the players the Giants had in their lineup, and yeah, we love all these, certain guys, but I mean, they're not Major League Baseball starters for the most part. And the Giants, it was kind of an indictment on the young kids to show that they really did not hang with it, but they couldn't even do their job this past weekend and beat the Dodgers.
No, I mean, it really put if you want to call it a shit cherry on top of the season. That was 2018. You went into the 6-game homestand where they did have and basically secured a winning record at home this year, which is saying something with this squad. And they lost 5 of their last 6 at home. They lost 2 out of 3 against the Padres, come in, lay a turd the first 2 games, which I know they were swept, but in those first 2 games, a base hit here or there, they could have won 1 or 2 of those games. They really could have. We talked about this before. That is how razor thin the margin for error is with this team when they play those tight games where 1 or 2 hits or something like that could have created a win or won the game for them. They just don't have that ability, and they're going to fail more times than not because of that lack of talent and, of course, all the injuries and everything else. And so, of course, they go in, they get swept by the Dodgers. The last game, they got just completely shuttle run, 15-0. And what a horrible way to end the season. And the unfortunate part of it is, well, first of all, fortunately, the Rockies won 2 out of 3, because if they hadn't, the Dodgers would have won the West outright and celebrated at AT&T Park, which they had a mild celebration in the clubhouse for their playoff, appearance that they secured. Whatever, that doesn't bother me as much. But if the Giants had just won 1 freaking game, just 1 game, they would have been relegated to the wild card game tonight in Chicago. Instead, they were forced into a tiebreaker with Colorado yesterday, and I watched that whole game. It's kind of funny. I watched more of the Rockies Dodgers 163 than I did for, I don't know, probably any individual game this past weekend, except for the 15-0 game. I subjected myself to that torture. I really did, because it was the last game of the season, and I just wanted to see what was going to happen and how bad. It was like a car wreck, I couldn't help but look at it.
You're a trooper,
man.
It
was awful. But, and the Dodgers go out, and Walker Buehler, the Tim Lincecum clone, goes out and throws a hell of a game, and Dodgers win. They win the West for the 6th consecutive year. And to understand and know the Giants could have prevented that is just so frustrating. So the only thing we have left to rely on, like we have for the past 6 years, is someone else knocking them out. That's really it.
Yeah, we turn into, this is the moment in time when we turn from Giants fans and to anybody who's playing LA. And I give you credit for watching that whole game Sunday. I monitored it. I watched until the Dodgers blew up in that 1 inning, and then I just kind of tuned in whenever Hunter Pence came to the plate. And I watched his 9th inning at bat, and I have a quick bone to pick with Urias of the Dodgers. It was a 15-0 game, and Hunter Pence was quite obviously having his last at bat in a Giants uniform. Groove a pitch or two. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's no danger to losing the game. There's no problem. Pence has earned such a hat tip, and to have him throw a 3-2 changeup after Pence had fouled a couple pitches off, it was insulting. It was like, I understand the kid Urias, he's like 21 at this point, and he wants to make his mark, but there's a certain amount of respect that goes in this game, and Hunter Pence is one of those players that carries that respect.
Yeah, that was frustrating. Mike Krukow was really ticked off by that. He was broadcasting the time on TV, and he couldn't believe it. I mean, they're up 15-0. Urias comes up and throws that 3-2 changeup on Hunter Pence's last at-bat. And it's one of those unwritten rules again. It harkens back. They were recalling the story in 2007 in Bond's final home appearance. Jake Peavy was on the mound for the Padres, and he just grooved fastball after fastball. And, of course, Bonds hit it out. And they hugged after the game. It was kind of like a wink-wink. Jake Peavy, the savvy veteran, knew what this meant for Barry Bonds. I'm sorry, I think it was on the road, actually, wasn't it? It was in San Diego. Anyway.
I think so, yeah.
There was that respect there where he just said, hey, man, I'm just going to let you go out in style. And he did. Urias is a young kid, and maybe he doesn't understand all of that. But, I was talking to one of my Dodgers friend at the gym, And I was mentioning that. And it was pretty funny because, he said, that's effed up in most cases, but not Dodgers versus Giants. I'm sorry. He's like, everything's off the table, man. It's the rivalry. It is what it is. And if it was a Dodger retiring, their last at-bat at home, I guarantee you a Giants pitcher would have done the same thing. And I don't know if that would have been true, but I understand his point. There is the rivalry there, and so for Dodgers fans, it was pouring more salt in the wound, which it sucked to see him go out like that. If he swings and misses at a fastball down the middle or somewhere in the zone, that's one thing. But a 3-2 changeup, it's just like, oh. And he was fooled, and it is what it is. But that's how Hunter Pence went out. Kind of sad.
Yeah, it was. The ovation was nice, and we'll get to the Hunter speech. It was a microcosm. That game was just, it felt like what September felt like. Yeah. And I mean, I know the Giants lost 98 games last year, and so they improved by 9 games this year?
9 games. I mean, that's after a historically bad season, right? I mean, that's not that much. It really doesn't seem like that much.
It felt worse. It really did. And I mean, and the reason is because they couldn't score a run. Ahmed Fareed shared something about how the Giants, and this was heading into Sunday's game, the Giants only scored 69 runs in the month of September. Yeah. 69 runs. The Brewers, Cubs, Dodgers, and Rockies on Sunday alone combined to score 48 runs. The A's in the month of September scored 167 runs, 98 more runs than the Giants. Yeah. And that was the top mark. And even the Marlins, who were, horrible as well, scored a good 15 to 20, I don't have the number in front of me, runs more than the Giants. So the fact that they can't hit, and they can't hit with runners in scoring position, was just on display. And, frankly, I'm kind of glad the season's over at this point. It was getting hard to watch there at the end of September.
Yeah, it was really getting hard. It was just the precipitous fall, starting with that 11-game losing streak, followed by another 6-game losing streak, going 5-21 in a month. I mean, that's, like we said at the top of the show, worst month ever in franchise history. New York and San Francisco combined. And unfortunately we witnessed it. And it just really shows how much they have to fix. And they talked with Bruce Bochy. I mean, Bruce Bochy came out after the game for fan appreciation and gave a nice little speech introducing Hunter Pence, and he acknowledged how bad the season was. And Hunter did the same thing. And in fact, I have his speech right here. So for those of you listening live, I don't have the video for you up, but we're going to have some audio here, about 3.5 minutes. So here's Hunter after the game.
Boch, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. The privilege has been all mine. I can promise you that. Working with a legend, working with a future Hall of Fame manager. Let's hear it for Bruce Bochy. Man, I'm lucky to play for you. All right, that was tough. Today, this game was tough. I'm not going to lie. It was tough. This season was tough. I'm not going to lie. It was bad. But you know what? You know what's greater than that? The spirit of San Francisco Giants was never broken. Never broken. You guys were up, clapping, down 15-0 to the Dodgers. And this leads me to the greater things that baseball teaches us. It's an analogy that I love from Wayne Dyer. When you have an orange and you squeeze it, what are you going to get out of an orange? You're going to get orange juice. Does it matter if it's a good day or a bad day? What are you going to get? Orange juice. When you come to AT&T Park, you're going to get love. You're going to get passion. You're going to get a full stadium, and you guys show that every single day. You get class, and you get integrity as well. It's not easy when it's tough. That's when you find out what you're made of. It's not easy when things aren't going right. And that's one of the reasons I'm most proud of these guys right here, going through one of the toughest seasons. Nobody pointed fingers. Nobody put blame. Everybody looked to get better, and they deserve a big round of applause. You guys are amazing. It's one of the greatest groups I've ever played with. Everybody says I'm a positive guy, and I like to think I'm mostly positive, and I'm somewhat of a realist. I'm definitely optimistic, but there are some negative times, and there's some great gifts in negativity. I love the scientific fact that it takes a positive ion and a negative ion to create a light. That light is on its way with the likes of the young Derek Rodriguez, Andrew Suarez, Steven Duggar, who got hurt playing his heart out in a clutch game when we were making a late push. We have a bright light coming, and these guys are working their tails off for it. I promise you, this pain is creating a next group of great Giants baseball. I love all you guys. I'm going to leave you with the last thing. One of my favorite quotes. The darkest hour of the night comes just before the dawn. You guys show unconditional love to us, and we appreciate that. The dawn is coming. Thank you so much for all the love, all the games. I hope you felt a little bit of the joy that I felt playing for you. I love you all. Thank you so much.
I love that, man.
There was his speech. I mean, honestly, it sounds cheesy, but I tell you, after I heard that speech, I didn't feel so bad. he has a way of lifting your spirits. He truly is a reverend. I mean, he is just very powerful in the way he speaks and very emotional. He connects to the fans. There's no doubt about it. He really has a passion for the Giants, and even if he's not on the team next year, I think he legitimately, truly has a fondness for the Giants. No matter if he plays or doesn't next year, if he plays for a different team, the Giants are always going to be probably his most special team, even more than the Phillies and the Astros. He truly, I think, loves this fan base, loves the front office, loves his teammates, loves the organization in the city. And it really came out in that speech. And, of course, speeches from years previous with yes, 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 and what he did in Cincinnati for the team in 2012 and things of that nature. But it was a really cool speech. And then afterwards, Rennell came out and presented him with his own scooter, customized scooter, and he hopped aboard and he did a whole lap around the entire park, you know, giving high fives to everyone. And then after his lap, he went down in the dugout to the corner where all the fans were, and he was there for 15 to 20 minutes signing autographs and answering questions. He was he's a class act, and he's 35 years old, and I wish the best for him. I just wish he had something left in the tank. He has a little bit. In fact, they were talking about statistically and just what you saw on the field, he clearly was their best outfielder in the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season. He was on fire. He played with a passion that people hadn't seen in a while. Not that his passion, diminished. I shouldn't say his passion, but his talent certainly ascended the last few weeks of the season. So he did go out on a high note statistically. But next year he's talking about going down to winter ball as a 35-year-old. No one does that. That's all for the young kids. But he's willing to do that just to prove he's still worthy of a major league uniform.
He told the beat writers after the game Sunday that he was going to get a workout in, and then he was going down to L.A. to work with a coach starting today, Tuesday, October 2nd, so that he could prepare himself for the winter ball, because Pence feels like he still has some left in the tank, and you can't blame a guy like that. That guy's motor goes 100% all the time, and I hope he catches on somewhere. I really do. There's no way the Giants are going to re-sign him, no matter how great of a clubhouse presence he is. Because during that speech, and that was the first time I'd heard the full audio. I'd seen little clips of it, and the scooter was fantastic. Yeah. I thought that was great how he just hopped on the scooter and started riding around it would have been funny if there was no gas in it. But my favorite little quotes from him were, "It takes a positive ion and a negative ion to create a light." Yeah. And that the darkest hour of the night comes before the dawn. And that September felt like the darkest hour of the last 2 seasons. And so, with the dismissal of Bobby Evans, we know that the Giants are going in a different direction. And it just sucks to see such a leader step away. Like, even Flan was putting all sorts of things on social media the last 2 days about how much he respects Hunter and how much, Hunter has impacted him. And so I wanted to ask you, I mean, I have some in my head, but I mean, aside from, his end of year speeches the last couple of years, or anything this year, what are some of your favorite Hunter Pence memories? What stands out to you when you think about the Hunter Pence era in San Francisco?
Yeah, I would say overall just his passion and intensity for the game, the way he played it. I mean, again, down 15-0, he's still hustling, running as hard as he can, doing everything he can to help his team. That's kind of just overall general, just a wonderful teammate, and plays it with such a fervor that I just really haven't seen in any other player. Even the greats don't play with that intensity. They just don't. He just is 100% all the time. But individually or specifically, certainly the catch against the fence at AT&T during the playoffs.
Oh, yeah.
The triple hit off the bat against the Cardinals at AT&T. Obviously the speech in Cincinnati when they were down 0-2, because that, everyone on the team claims how spiritual it was and how it really did transcend sports, and he really got everyone to buy in, and that really was the catalyst to them coming back with 3 straight wins against the Reds. I mean, those in particular, but just overall, wonderful with the fans, wonderful with the media. He'd been wonderful with us whenever we talked to him. Just a regular guy. Really, he really was, or is, I should say, a regular guy. And, like we said last podcast, even if he doesn't play baseball next year, which I think he's going to sign on with someone in some maybe bench role, some spring training invite, and he'll probably make it somewhere for maybe another year. But, he's got a bright future ahead of him with media, social media, content, the coffee shop and video game arcade he's opening up, or opened up down in Austin, I believe it is, with his wife Lexi. He's got a lot ahead of him. He's had a great, wonderful career. Not a Hall of Fame career, but a good career.
No.
And he's got 2 world championships. So, if I'm Hunter Pence, pretty damn happy with my career. And he made $90 million over the last 5 years. So he's not not hurting for dough. And he's not the kind of guy who's blown his money everywhere.
It's kind of the thing that led to some of the memories. I jotted down some in the speeches in 2012. Absolutely. I mean, the whole, I want to see what Ryan Terrio's wearing tomorrow, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then in 2013, in September, right before he signed his 5-year extension, they had a series in LA that he hit 5 home runs. And it's just, I'll always remember it because he hit the first home run to right, the second home run to right center. The third home run was to center field. The fourth home run was to left center. And the fifth home run was down the left field line. And I can't recall in my life ever seeing a player do that. He just worked the whole stadium across. And it was about a week later, at the end of the season, when Larry Baer and Hunter got together, and he just did the contract without his agent, without anything like that. They just did that $90 million contract.
I know, isn't that crazy? I mean,
yeah.
It
takes a different. Yep.
It makes sense, or made sense to retain him, and he was valuable in 2014.
Yep.
He hit 444 in the World Series, and he just wasn't MVP because of Madison Bumgarner. If it wasn't for Madison, if he had a pedestrian performance and the Giants won 4-2 or something like that, I guarantee you Hunter would have been MVP that World Series. So extremely valuable for that first year. 2015 still okay. He really started tailing off, of course, in 2016, 17, and 18. And it's all age-related, and unfortunately the Giants, again, have all of these contracts which they give to players who have had past success, helping them win championships. And unfortunately they hit that wall with age or injury, and the back end of the contracts just always look horrible. They just look horrible. And, those are some of the things that give me caution for guys like Madison Bumgarner. He has not shown any indication of wear and tear or burning down or injury other than falling off a motorcycle and getting hit by a line drive. Those are things that are not health related, right? Those are incidents, acute incidents, not chronic injury, chronic problems. Like Matt Cain, look at his contract. He was a horse. He had so many innings. He was never injured. He pitched a perfect game. He was unbelievable. He was great in the playoffs. Signs that contract, and within a year or two, starts having bone spurs and elbow problems, and boom, he fades out, right? Same thing with Hunter Pence. Barry Zito. I mean, you go down the list, and even, I hate to say it, but even Buster Posey, he just hasn't had the production of what should be deserved of a $20 million a year kind of guy. And so my fear is a guy like Madison Bumgarner, who's still relatively young at 29, if they sign him, because they want an extension, if they sign him to some sort of crazy 5-year, $100 to $120 million extension, that's $25 million a year or so. Again, I'm afraid that the first year or two might be okay. He might be earning most of his money, but the back end of that deal, I'm afraid at age 33, 34, he's going to have the same issues. And I'm not saying get rid of Madison. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying be careful of those albatross contracts later in these players' careers.
Yeah, I have a feeling we're not going to really get into off-season moves on this podcast, because on this particular episode, because I do feel we need to know who the new leader of the Giants is and what direction they're going to go first. So we'll let the playoffs play out before we really get into that kind of stuff. Yeah. But you got to think that even though Sabes is still in the front office, they've said we want somebody who's analytic but not necessarily fully analytic. I mean, the Giants are looking for a guy to step in, and this is a very desirable job. You've got a fan base that is behind you. You've got a tradition of winning over the last 10 years. You've got star players like Bumgarner and Posey that management would love to work with and build around. And so I think the Giants' job is a very, very appealing job. And when we find out who gets it, I think we'll get a better idea of what direction they take.
Yeah, Larry Baer I was going to say Larry Baer was on the morning show a couple days ago, and I was listening to him. And they were like, I know you can't reveal who you're looking for and who you might be interviewing, who you've contacted, but, what do you think about this new GM position? And Larry Baer, I think he was genuine in saying, you know what, this is a very desirable job, just like you said. So they've been contacted by numerous people interested in the job. He didn't, of course, reveal any names or whatever. So he said we haven't set up any interviews yet, but he's like, we definitely have very, very interested people. And I mean, San Francisco is a desirable place to come and live and work and take your family here. You have challenges with trying to hire a bat here, but I think overall, you have a high payroll, you have a great stadium, you have a great fan base, you have supporting people. So I think it is a desirable job.
Yeah, one name to note, Ben Cherington helped put together the Red Sox that started winning titles, and it looks like he's somebody that is somewhat connected to Sabian, so it's a possibility. He's the one guy I have my eye on, but other than that, I mean, who knows? Because half the people that are contacted the Giants who are interested, we know they won't even talk to. So, I mean, it's nice to know that they're willing to look for change. You talk about the contracts, you talk about the last few years, and it always felt like the Giants don't want to change their philosophy in any way, shape, or form. But when you're not driving in runners, when you're leaving so many people on base, when your batting average with runners in scoring position is like the worst in baseball, it's time to make some changes. And I hope that when, they come in, they do it. They have a good direction and a plan going forward. It's just, that's all we have to look forward to. After 16, we thought maybe 17 would be another good year, and then it was horrible. So after last year, the only thing we wanted from this year was just a better team. And while we got one for 5 months, it really took a nosedive at the end. And so I'm going to miss the Giants. I'm really going to miss the day in and day out. But I will not miss this particular group of players in the sense that it's time to move on. When Evan Longoria is your nominee for the best offensive player on the team for the Hank Aaron Award, I think there's something wrong, because Longoria didn't have the best season. It took him all year to adjust to the National League. Yeah. And so, I look forward to this. And hopefully next year, when we are sitting in these chairs in October, we'll be previewing another Giants and the playoffs.
We've done it 3 times before, so I hope to do it again. I don't want that 2016 to be the last time I previewed a playoff series. Speaking of playoffs, we did have 2 Game 163s. First time in Major League history that happened. But it's also an unusual one, because if you add up all the Game 163s in the past, it was typically for a wild card spot or a division title with the loser going home. In this case, we had both losers just go to the wild card game, which is being played tonight in Chicago. So we can talk about that just real briefly, but we had Milwaukee and Chicago tying for the NL Central. They were 5 games behind the Cubs at the beginning of the month, and they made up that ground. They just were on fire in September, like you mentioned earlier, and they were fantastic. And so, like you said, 48 runs between all 4 teams that were in kind of the mix. They both teams destroyed their opponents, and they met together. And it was a pretty tight game up until, I believe, the 7th or 8th inning, when Lorenzo Cain, got a knock, and the Brewers ended up winning 3-1. And that's a huge swing. I mean, you're talking about going to the NLDS, where you have at least 3 games, versus going to the wild card game, and you've also burned some of your pitching going through game 163 and the previous week trying to get to this point. So, the Cubs are going to be a little bit stressed tonight, and they're going to be facing the Rockies, who we mentioned at the top of the show lost to the Dodgers. Unfortunately, Walker Buehler, again, a.k.a. Tim Lincecum's clone, just had a fantastic game, and Marquez just didn't have it. He gave up a couple of bombs, and that was really all she wrote. So it's going to be Rockies at Cubs tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific. And right now, I think the early line is Cubs favored, -135, but you got John Lester going, and he's got 22 starts in the postseason, all this great experience and history and success in the postseason, and they're playing at home. And they're playing a Rockies team with, I forget the guy's name, Freeland or whatever, going tonight.
Yes.
Who
Kyle
has
Freeland,
0 postseason starts, and he's on 3 days rest. So it's looking good for the Cubs on paper. But what did you think about both Game 163s? Did you watch them? And what do you think about tonight's matchup?
Well, anybody who's listened to this show before knows that I watch Cubs baseball. And yesterday was a very tense afternoon in my house because my wife is a diehard Cubs fan. Mm-hmm. And the saving grace was, like you mentioned, none of those teams got eliminated yesterday. Right before I mentioned the games, it's funny because before the 2 wild card era, if this was just the 1 wild card era, the Cubs would have won the division based on season series over the Brewers, and the Brewers would have won the wild card. And only the Rockies and the Dodgers would have had to play for the NL West, and then the loser of that game just would have missed the playoffs. But since they added the second wild card team, they've decided we're going to play all tiebreaker games and not go to season series. And so that's why we had 2 games yesterday for the first time in history that were non-elimination 163s.
Right.
And coming out of it, and I watched, like I said, I watch a lot of Cubs baseball, and obviously I watch a lot of Rockies baseball, watching the NL West, and they play later a lot of the time. I'm liking the Cubs for tonight's game. I like Lester. He is a horse. He's been pitching pretty well down the stretch lately. Lester is the kind of pitcher that the Cubs offense tries to get up for. That he has shown in the past that you mentioned this is his 27th playoff start or something like that.
Yeah,
he's got
20 something. Yeah.
He's got 3 World Series rings, 07, 13, and 16. Yep. There's just everything points to the Cubs. And I mean, as somebody who will be watching with a Cubs fan, that scares me a little bit because when the expectations are high, the crash is worse.
It's one game, man, right? Anything can happen.
Yes.
That's the problem. Yep.
That is the problem.
Can happen. He gives up. They're playing the Rockies. They got big boppers. They got Nolan Arenado and Trevor Story and all these guys. And he's been known to walk a few. And he walks a couple or allows a hit. It's a tight game, and Arenado or someone like that comes up and he just grooves one accidentally, and suddenly it's 4-1 Rockies. I mean that can happen tonight.
Yeah, it could. But I'm going to lean towards the Cubs. I think the Cubs are too good. I've been saying it for months that I think they're the best team in the National League. Yeah. And it kind of sucks that if the Cubs win this game that they have to play the Brewers in a 5-game series, only because I'd prefer to see those 2 teams play a 7-game series. I think they're the 2 best teams in the National League. I think the Brewers I honestly, the Brewers are right next to the Cubs. Like, I am so freaking impressed by the Brewers that it's ridiculous. I had no idea that they were as good as they were down the stretch. I mean, when you got a lineup with Kane and Yelich setting the table at the top, especially with the way Yelich had played in September, I mean, the guy literally is as hot as the sun right now. And so seeing those two teams battle, I was more concerned for the Cubs in the one game against the Brewers than I would be in the one game with them against anybody else. And if the Cubs can pull this out, I totally think that they'll be able to take care of the Brewers in a 5-game series. But like you said, anything can happen. It's a 1-game playoff. I personally hate the wild card game for the coin flip aspect of it. But I've got my money on the Cubs tonight, and on the other side, tomorrow night the A's and the Yankees will play the American League wild card game, and the Yankees are starting Luis Severino. The A's are going to bullpen the game.
They're going to do the bullpen start, a la themselves in Tampa Bay. Yep.
They're going to use the opener and bullpen through the game, and I'm giving the edge to the A's. Mm-hmm. I think the A's are better than people realize, and I think they might surprise some people in Yankee Stadium tomorrow night.
Oh, I totally agree with you. Like, again, these are coin flip games. I mean, the worst team in the majors this year, the Baltimore Orioles, did beat the Red Sox, did beat the Astros, did beat, the top teams. It does happen. So, I mean, it's baseball. It's not as dominant as football and certainly not basketball. You put the Warriors up in one game against most teams, you're going to win 80% of the time, right? 90% of the time. You put up the Red Sox against the Orioles, and they might win 60% of the time, 65% of the time. So it really is a coin flip for a lot of and these are the elite teams, right? These are the ones that have all won more than 90 games. So it just takes one mistake to completely flip the game on its head. And the pitcher has so much influence on these wild card games, more so than your other team sports. So if a pitcher's off, it's going to be tough for that team. Both pitchers are off, it becomes a game. Both pitchers are on, it becomes a game. But if one pitcher's off, it's you can put him behind the 8 ball.
We saw it for 3 straight years. Bumgarner in 14 in Pittsburgh, Arrieta in 15 in Pittsburgh, and then Bumgarner again in 16 in New York. Certain pitchers can just grab control of the game and do it. And I think John Lester is one of those pitchers, and he could do that in the Cubs game. But when it comes to the Yankees and A's, it's really hard to think that a pitcher is going to do that. I totally expect us to see something like a 7-5 or 9-7 type game for the American League one. I'm looking back on some of the wild card games in the past, and the road team. It doesn't matter if you're the home or the road team. The road team actually has more wins in wild card games than the home teams. Yeah, so. Right. So being the coin flip game that it is, it doesn't matter where it's played necessarily. But that being said, I totally give the edge to the Cubs tonight, and personally I'm picking the A's for tomorrow night.
So, okay, let's go through this. So we both picked the Cubs for tonight. You picked the A's for tomorrow night. I am going with the Yankees only because I just think there's going to be an inning or two which one of the bullpen guys, and they have an amazing bullpen. The A's they're nasty as hell. Don't get me wrong. And it is a coin flip game, but I do think the Yankees are going to eke this one out. The A's had that game in 2014 against the Royals. They should have won it multiple times, which is so funny considering that could have altered the destiny of the Giants because they ended up beating the Royals in 7 games. I'm not saying the Giants wouldn't have won the World Series, but I know that I wouldn't change it right now, right? They won.
And
they beat the
ironically,
Royals.
Ironically, though, the starter for the A's in that 2014 wild card, John Lester.
Was John Lester. Yep. Exactly. Oh, that's a good call. Okay, so wild card winner at Brewers. We're talking, we both think the Cubs are playing the Brewers. But regardless if it's the Rockies or Cubs, who do you think takes the NLDS in that series?
I mean, I picked the Cubs over the Brewers, and I would not pick the Rockies over the Brewers. If the Rockies squeak by the Cubs, the Brewers, I ticket the Brewers for the World Series. I feel like the Cubs Brewers, as I just said, is going to be the matchup of the 2 best teams in the National League, and I think the Cubs can outlast the Brewers. It might go a full 5 games, but the Cubs are not scared to play in Milwaukee. There's barely any travel involved in that series. It's literally a bus ride. The Brewers took a bus down to Chicago for the game yesterday. I've made the drive myself. That's where I grew up, and it's 90 minutes. It's really nothing, all they got to do is shoot up 94. But I think the Cubs, they have more talent. They're just deeper. And as much as I think Craig Counsell has done a fantastic job this year, Joe Madden is still a better manager than him and much more experienced at the playoff baseball.
Oh, he is.
The Brewers haven't been in the playoffs since 2011. So Ryan Braun is pretty much the only leftover guy who has gone through this before. So this is new to Yelich. This is new to their pitching staff. Lorenzo Cain has a ring, and Moustakas has a ring. So there's a little bit of veteran leadership there. But other than that, I mean, it's a new stage, and we both know certain teams, their onions just shrink up on that big stage, and I think it's possible that might happen to the Brewers. So I'm going to take the Cubs in 5 in a Cubs-Brewers series.
Okay. Yeah, I'm taking the Cubs, too, for the NLDS to go to the NLCS. Then we have the Braves and the Dodgers. The Dodgers do get the home field advantage for the NLDS because they do have a better record than the Braves. The Braves, unfortunately for them, lost their last 2 games against the Phillies, which unfortunately put them in that position. Dodgers have been hot. Braves are amazing with Acuna and all these guys, Fontanevich and all them. Again, the Dodgers are very powerful. And you and I were kind of riding the Dodgers a little bit last year, and they did. They made it all the way to the 7th game of the World Series. So they've proven that they can get there. They just can't seal the deal. And I'm telling you, man, a clock is right, twice a day, right? Every clock is right, or a broken clock is right twice a day. And I just feel like the more and more the Dodgers get into the goddamn postseason, it's inevitable that they're going to make a run at some point. Do I think it's going to happen this year? Not necessarily, but I'm definitely picking the Dodgers over the Braves.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on the Dodgers over the Braves. I think a lot of the things I listed in the Cubs-Brewers series apply here as well. The Brewers, Freddie Freeman's like the only guy who's been through this before. Nick Markakis just made the postseason for the first time in his career, which kind of blew my mind. Yeah. They've got great young talent with Albies and Acuna, but the Dodgers been there, done that, and they have the home field advantage. I would not be surprised if the Dodgers actually win the first 2 games and close it out in 3, but I don't think it goes back for a Game 5. I think the Dodgers will clinch this in Atlanta, and we'll have yet another Cubs-Dodgers NLCS.
All right, so ALDS, we got the wild card winner at the Red Sox. I'm calling, obviously, Yankees, but it doesn't matter, Yankees or A's. Again, short series, anything can happen. Look at Seattle in 2001 with 116 wins. They didn't even make it out of the DS, and no one thought that was going to happen. But that's what happens in short series. So, again, I'm going to go Red Sox. Now, you're going a little different here, right?
I am. I'm going to ride the A's hot hand. I think as good as the Red Sox are, they are. I mean, they got the guy who played the best in baseball this year in Mookie Betts. They've got fantastic pitching with Sale and Price. But there's just something about the A's and the fact that they are relentless that I like. And I think the A's are going to surprise some people. And just like you mentioned, 2001, I think the A's are going to snatch it away from the Red Sox. I'm kind of high on the A's right now. Yeah. So I'm expecting a little bit of an upset. In fact, I think I've picked upsets in both of them. Yeah. So I'm gonna stick with the A's. I think the A's are going to make the ALCS.
And I think both of you picked the Indians for the ALDS against the Astros. Look, the Astros are the defending world champions, and they had a better record than the Indians. And the Astros have that postseason kind of experience, but so do the Indians. That's the whole thing. And the Indians ended up so close again against the Cubs back in 2016. They have a lot of post-season roster depth, a great manager. I just think, again, it's more of a coin flip for me, but I'm just giving the edge to the Indians. I just think, even though they don't have home field advantage in the DS, I think for some reason they're gonna do it. They're gonna beat the Astros. They're gonna knock them off this year. They feel like that team. I don't know. They remind me of their 2016 run. They do. They remind me of the same team. They only won 91 games, but they were in a division where they didn't have to win a lot of games. And when a team can do that and just kind of coast towards the end, it's not necessarily a bad thing. They're set up for the playoffs with who they want to pitch, when they want to pitch. I mean, the AL field was set like a week and a half ago. Yeah. So I'm taking the Indians. I'm not sure Verlander is going to be the Verlander he always has. And much like I mentioned, the A's are relentless. I feel like the Indians are the same way. And once you get into the Indians bullpen, it's almost lights out. So anytime they have a lead, I figure they'll win the game. So I've got the Indians, yeah. All right, so let's just go real quickly with the AL and NL champ. I'm picking the Red Sox versus the Dodgers, with the Red Sox coming out on top as World Series champs. What do you think?
And I've got the Indians beating the A's and the Cubs beating the Dodgers, and I think that the Cubs are going to take it all. I think that the 4 games in the AL Park with the addition of a DH will help the Cubs again, and I hope it doesn't go 7 again, because I don't know if I could live through that again. It's not me living through it. I got a wife who loves the Cubs, and I feel so bad when she's going through it, but this must have been what she looked at me like during 12 and 14, especially 14. So, you always want to see good things for the people you love, and it might be coloring my judgment, but I'm going to take the Cubs to win it all because I've been banging that drum for months. Yeah. Once I realized that the Giants were not going to win the World Series, which, was in April, I've been kind of, on that Cubs bandwagon, and I think that they're good enough. As long as their bullpen can sort of keep it together, if Pedro Strop can come back healthy from the stupid injury from a couple weeks ago, I think that the Cubs will be okay. I feel like they're too talented and deep. Probably for the same reasons that you're picking the Red Sox. I feel like, the talent is there and the depth is there.
They're just so good. I mean, I know it's kind of like they won 108 games. It's like, oh, okay. But, just like the Mariners again in 2001. Playoffs, again, just you never know what can happen. The Giants were essentially the number 10 seed in 2014, and they won it all. So, hey, we know that this is just fun. We just love talking about this, and whoever's, if one of us is right or we're both wrong, whatever, it doesn't mean that we either know baseball really well or don't know baseball at all, because
right.
Again, anything can happen in the playoffs. But it's going to be fun in the next couple of weeks when we record again, hopefully prior to the LCS, to see where we are, and then if we have a chance before the World Series. Might be a little tough with my schedule, but at some point in the future to kind of review our picks and see where we went.
Yeah, this ain't going to be last year when we all had the same picks except for the World Series, and they all pretty much came true.
They did, yeah. It wasn't too bad last year. All right, so let's just spend a few seconds on each of these guys for the postseason award picks. This is an idea by Eric. I think it was a great idea, but we want to give our picks for both leagues: Cy Young, MVP, Manager of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and then the Giants' most valuable player, but also their least valuable player. Now, Eric and I did not see each other's results or choices before we put them in the notes, so it's pretty amazing to see. Some of them are easy, I get, but some of them aren't so much, and we were pretty similar on most of these picks. So I'll start off. For NL Cy Young, I'm going Jacob deGrom. Now, I know, traditionally he only has 10 wins, and he's only 10-9, but he played for a bad Mets team. But his ERA was a sparkling 1.70. The next closest on the list was 2.37, and of course with a 0.91 whip and his strikeouts, he just probably was the most dominant pitcher on the mound in the National League this year, even more than Scherzer and these other guys.
Yeah, I second that. I have deGrom first. I gave Scherzer the nod at second, and then Aaron Nola of the Phillies comes in third. I think,
great year.
Yeah, had the Phillies kept up, I think there would have been talk about Nola, but I mean, deGrom was just dominant this year.
Yeah. AL, that one I think was easy. That was probably the easiest pick. Blake Snell of the Rays. They did win 90 games this year, so that wasn't a bad team. 21-5 with a 1.89 ERA in the American League with a 0.97 whip. I mean, the dude was he was a video game this year. I mean, there's no one even close to him in the American League. I think this was probably the easiest pick out of everyone.
Yeah, he just kept going out there and doing it too, and he did not slow down in September. I considered Sale and Garrett Cole of the Astros, but Snell, to me, I agree. He was the easy choice.
And it'll be funny because it won't be unanimous, right? They'll have some local market, some guy going, yeah, well, I thought X because their playoff team had more contributions, like your Garrett Cole or Verlanders or whoever. But no, I think Blake Snell, because they were almost a playoff team. They were not irrelevant. They were a good team this year. And, he was, if it wasn't for them, the Rays would have been under 500 probably. NL, this one I don't think is as hard, or I should say as easy as the AL, but, I mean, come on, how can you not go with Christian Yelich? He was 1 home run and 1 RBI away from the Triple Crown. In fact, in his last at-bat in Chicago, Tim Kirchin was kind of giddy because he was like, hey, guys, his voice, right? Hey, guys, if he hits a 3-run home run right now, he'll win the Triple Crown. It'll be the first time ever that's happened, especially in a game 163. And it's true. I mean, if he had somehow hit a home run right there in that situation, that would have given him the Triple Crown. So it shows you how amazing he was. Arenado only won the home run crown because he hit 3 in the last 2 games of the season, including 1 in L.A. in the 9th inning. And 1 RBI behind Javier Baez. So I think, to me, especially given his September, which is what the Brewers needed to get to this position.
Right.
He was absolutely incredible. Just 10 home runs in the month, led all of baseball, along with his insane batting average and RBI total. So if it's not for Christian Yelich over the entire season, of course the Brewers don't make the playoffs, but if it's not even for his hot month of September, they may have squeaked into a second wild card, but they certainly would not have been in position in Game 163.
No, not at all. I had Baez as my MVP all season long. I did. The guy was phenomenal.
He was.
I mean, he hit 40 doubles, 30 homers, and stole 20 bases, which nobody on the Cubs had ever done in their history. And Baez was the catalyst for many of their big victories during the season. And overall, he was just the best player in the National League for pretty much about 4.5, 5 months. And then Yelich puts the Brewers on his back during September, and he put up numbers and played better than I think anybody expected him to. So I had to give the nod to Yelich. I don't think yesterday specifically changed my mind. It was the end of September, but I mean, it's just, he showed he's the best in the National League this season, and it's like we're splitting hairs at this point. We really are, because, you know, as much as I know our fan base, the Giants fan base, hates Javi Baez, you have to respect. and I'm not even going to go off on how I don't get that.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
But, you know, Javi, you got to respect the season he put up. He was the star of the Chicago Cubs team who won the second most games in the National League, you know, in a season when Chris Bryant was hurt, Anthony Rizzo struggled, and Yelich, he didn't have a better supporting cast, but I mean, that's kind of why he stood out. Christian Yelich, I have to give him the nod. I would put Yelich first, and if there could be a 1 and 1A, it'd be Yelich and Baez, but it's Yelich first, then Baez.
For AL, I'm going with Mookie Betts. Incredible year, 346, 32 bombs, 80 RBI, 30 stolen bases. He's the first 30-30 guy to win a batting title, and his OPS was over 1,000. It was 107.8. These are getting into Bonzian territory. He was just incredible this year. So, and he's a 5-tool player. I mean, he's a great defender, great arm, great speed. Obviously, hit for average and power. So, I think again, it's a fairly clear choice in my estimation.
Yeah, it's Betts. I know that there are people out there, and I agree with you, that Mike Trout is the best player in baseball and should win it every year.
I would draft Mike Trout over Mookie Betts if I started a team. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But that doesn't mean he's MVP. Yeah.
Nope, not this year. If Betts is hurt, the Red Sox are good. They're not great. If Trout gets hurt, the Angels still suck regardless. So that's kind of, you know what I mean? That's kind of my dividing line right there. So I'm with you. Mookie Betts.
So for Manager of the Year, NL I'm going Craig Counsell with the Brewers, and AL I'm going Alex Cora. I think because Alex Cora, it's his first year, and he drives the bus to 108 wins. He just pulled all the strings, and I watched a lot of interviews with players, and they just love the guy. He's a former player, a gritty shortstop, second baseman, infielder himself. So, and he's only 42 or 43 years old. He's younger than me, and he's managing a major league team. I just think, you know, I've utter respect for how he drove the bus for the Red Sox this year. And then Craig Counsell, he has been with the Brewers. This is, I believe, his 4th year with the Brewers. But again, another gritty infielder and / bench player who I think just got the most out of his talent this year. Obviously, Yelich was incredible, but you also have some other guys who really, really stepped up. And again, people spoke highly of him. There are certainly other candidates. I think this is a little bit of a tougher call, but those are just my 2 choices.
Yeah, I'm with you on both choices. Alex Cora, you totally nailed it. When it comes to Craig Counsell, I, again, you know, was leaning Cubs, and Joe Madden did a hell of a job on the north side of Chicago because of those injuries I mentioned. The Cubs had so much stuff happen this year, and to have them still finish where they did is kind of amazing. But the Brewers, I mean, we all looked at the team during the offseason when they got Kane, when they got Yelich, they signed Chacin, and everybody was kind of like, that's it? You need starting pitching. Why aren't you guys going out and getting starting pitching? And Craig Counsell showed why they didn't even need it. With their bullpen and how dominant it's been with Knievel and Hader the racist and Jeffries. you know that Counsell has a way he can manage. He has the freedom to manage in certain ways, and yesterday during that wild card, that game 163, it stood out. Counsell managed a better game, and I give him the slight nod over Joe Madden this year.
Yeah. So for Rookie of the Year, I'm going with Ronald Acuna Jr. Soto was incredible for the Nationals. He came up a little bit later and just tore it wide open. But Acuna definitely had the better defensive metrics in terms of runs saved and all these other things. So I'm going to give it to the more rounded player. Soto is 19 years old. I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. He's going to be the heir apparent to Bryce Harper in Washington. So I think he's going to have plenty of chances to do great things in Washington, especially, he's like Ken Griffey Jr. reincarnated, essentially. So I'm going to give it to Acuna this year. I know Nats fans want to give it to Soto. If he had come up earlier in the year and maybe hit for, I think it was 22 to 26 home runs. But again, Acuna being the more well-rounded player, I got to give it to him.
Yeah, I'm with you on, again, both picks. And like Chad said, we did not discuss any of this beforehand. All I did is text him and say, hey, let's do this. And he's like, sure, that's a good idea. And then, I sat down Sunday night and I wrote down everything. And then when I stepped into the notes today, the picks were all the same. It was kind of blew my mind, actually. I totally agree. I would take Acuna Jr. Soto, honestly, if the Nats were better, Soto would get more recognition. Sure. But Acuna is part of the reason that the Braves are in the playoffs, and he's a well-rounded, and he's got a bright future. And so does Soto. That was easier than the American League. The American League was not easy to pick. And over on the American League side, we both ended up going with Shohei Ohtani over, guys like Gleyber Torres, and I don't even know who else. There you go. Yeah. And it's just, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if this is why you chose Ohtani, but I did, because just the fact that he was able to both pitch and hit and do both of them exceptionally well. He seemed like the best rookie in the American League to me all season. And he had his Tommy John surgery yesterday. It was successful. So I think he's going to come back as a hitter next season, and they'll work on the pitching the year after. But he just showed himself to be so good. And he was everything that he was advertised, and frankly, even more. His hands are so fast through that zone that I didn't expect him to homer as much as he did. And so I think he was the best rookie in the American League.
Yeah, you have to consider his pitching metrics, even if he never pitches again, and I know he only pitched half the year or whatever, but his statistics were so far above average for a rookie, and what he contributed to the Angels. And then, of course, on the offensive side, even if it wasn't for the pitching, I still might give it to Ohtani over we just said Gleyber Torres or Andujar from the Yankees. Andujar had a great year, there's no doubt about it, but Ohtani's OPS and his home runs per at bat and those kinds of things were still higher than Andujar. So I know some Yankees fans are like, how can you not give it to Andujar? And it's like, well, because this guy did something that no one's done in almost 100 years.
Yeah, if Ohtani had been swinging the bat all season and never pitched, he probably would have hit 35 home runs, driven in 100, and that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, and the fact, of course, he hit with a UCL injury that required Tommy John, which is incredible, because in this day and age, that doesn't happen, because it's pitchers who get hurt with that injury and they just go have the surgery because they don't hit. But he was so valuable as a hitter, they were like, so we're just going to delay your surgery to the off season so you can still hit for us. And he's like, cool, no problem.
Yeah. And he had a 2-homer game the day that it was announced he was going to have to get Tommy John surgery. It was ridiculous. I mean, he's one of those players that apparently steps up when the lights are bright. So I really hope the Angels are competitive at some point, because it'd be nice for Ohtani to get a bigger stage.
Yeah, and the Giants were one of the final, 3 or 4 teams that he was considering. And he met with Buster Posey, remember that? And all that at the beginning of the year. But whatever. I don't know if it would have changed the season too much, considering he got injured too. And half the Giants got injured with bad stuff. All right, so we're going to talk about Giants' most valuable player and least valuable player. And this is the only place where we differ just a little bit. for most valuable player, but least valuable player, we both agreed independently, without seeing each other, Jeff Samardzija. Oh, and of course, my reasons are not just his performance this year. 1-5, 6.25 ERA. He didn't play that much, but it's just the albatross contract and just everything else. So even when he did play, he was horrible. And nothing against the guy personally, but if we're gonna choose the quote least valuable player, you could choose someone who was up for a week and didn't do anything for the team and got blown out like Snelton or someone like that early in the year. But now we wanted to choose someone who's kind of normally on the 25-man roster.
Yeah, that was the irony of us both picking Shark is, one of us could have had the mindset, well, who played all year and stunk? Like last year we would have handed it to Gorky's, I'm sure. Yeah. But, this year with Shark, the injuries, we were not sure if they were real injuries. There was some strain here and this here. And then it didn't seem like the Giants and Samardzija were on the same page about his injuries all season long. Yeah. And, it's like you said, that contract, there's 2-3 more years left?
I don't know, 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have it in me to go look it up right now. Samardzija, it was so disappointing. It really was, and yeah, it just was. He is a microcosm of what a bad year it was, and it's a shame because he's a hell of a guy. He just was their absolutely least valuable player this season.
Now for Giants MVP, I you know what? Look, both of our picks are legitimate. I do like Eric's pick, and in fact, I was kind of sitting on the fence between both of them. I really was. I went with Andrew McCutchen, and I know it's ironic because he's no longer with the team, and he was traded a month ago. And he since went to the Yankees and hit like 4 or 5 additional home runs. He's been playing very, very well with them. It's amazing what happened right when you got out of AT&T. But he still ended up hitting, 255, 15 home runs, 55 RBIs. Now, what's interesting is that he did have fewer at-bats than Crawford. Longoria and Cutchin, I think, were pretty close because Longoria, of course, was on the shelf for a while. I don't have the stats in front of me. But Longoria and Crawford were very, very close to those numbers. They were all within 10 points in average. They were all within 1 home run, and they were all within 1 or 2 RBI. So they were kind of clones of each other in terms of just statistical performance. But I thought Andrew McCutchen on the field and the clubhouse, his bomb against the Dodgers earlier in the year, those kinds of things just kind of, it's just a little ironic that he's no longer with the team. I understand why the Giants did it, but at the same, because they probably weren't going to sign him for next year anyway, and they knew the season was over, so they got some value for him. Avino, or whatever his name is, who came over and has played a few games in the last couple of weeks. But I do like your pick too, and it might be the more legitimate pick because he's still on the team.
Yeah, I went with Derek Rodriguez because, first of all, who the hell expected Derek Rodriguez to be so important to the Giants? And we heard it in the Hunter Pence speech. Derek was the first guy he mentioned. So it shows you the impact that he had on that team. And just looking at Derek's stats for the season, in 118 innings pitched, he had a 2.81 ERA. He had 19 starts, and he gave up 37 earned runs in those starts. He wasn't a victim of the long ball much. He gave up 9 home runs, which is about 1 every, 12 innings. So that's not that bad. His strikeout to walk ratio wasn't that great, but he had the lowest whip of any Giants starting pitcher this season at 1.132, which I'll be honest, kind of surprised me. But like I mentioned, Pence, said Rodriguez's name right away because I feel like, and this is the main reason I chose Rodriguez, is every time he took the ball, you felt like the Giants had an opportunity to win. And no disrespect to Madison Bumgarner, I really thought that D-Rod was the one guy this season who had that role. Bum, there were a couple starts where he would, kind of lose it for an inning or so, and it never felt like Derek Rodriguez had that happen. And being the son of a Hall of Famer, I'm sure helps. He was just, to me, the standout on the Giants this season. And it's funny because he can't get nominated for any award. I saw earlier Evan Longoria got nominated for the Roberto Clemente Award for the Giants, but if there was one for all-around team MVP, I think D-Rod would have gotten some nods for it. And he was the class of the San Francisco Giants this year. And I honestly, my second choice would have been Derek Holland. I know that sounds weird.
He's great.
But he pitched the most innings for the Giants this season. He came in on a contract that didn't guarantee a damn thing. And he went out there and he performed and he took the ball. He had 30 starts this season, the most on the staff. His ERA was 3.57, which was a hell of an improvement from last year. And, the main difference was D-Rod's young. And like I said, every time he took the mound, you felt like the Giants could win. And that, to me, was just the clincher of it. D-Rod also had a 2.3, according to Baseball Reference, WAR. Bumgarner snuck past him with his final start with a 2.5 WAR. Or else Derek would have had the highest pitching WAR on the team. Buster ended up with the best overall at 2.9, which kind of surprised me.
Yeah, that's a little surprising.
Yeah, Belt and Crawford behind him, and then, but Derek just was phenomenal.
Yeah, and if it wasn't for his last start, because he came into that last start with a 2.52 ERA or something like that, so he bumped up his ERA a third of a run almost because of that. He wasn't very good in that last start. So the stats are even a little bit misleading in the sense of how good he was up until his last start. But overall, just a fantastic year for Derek Rodriguez, a worthy pick of MVP. So that's a good call. Well, crap, here we go. We're going into some playoff action. I know the Giants aren't there, but Eric and I are still baseball fans. We love to talk about it. We love to watch these games. We talked half the podcast about the playoffs today, so shows you our passion for it. But I also hope you enjoyed, for those of you that did tune in, I think there's only 3 or 4 people online right now. That's okay. For our first Facebook Live broadcast, and I think we'll go in the future trying this out and maybe enhancing it a little bit more. But thank you for tuning in. We'll definitely have more of a schedule in the future so people can kind of know when it's going to happen, except for, instead of just kind of right before we do it, 10 minutes beforehand. But you can certainly get our podcast normally on all of your podcast sources, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, you name it, we're going to be there. You can also check us out at torturecast.com. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at TortureCast. You can follow us individually, me at ChadK21 and Eric at 2OutHit. So we're going to have some baseball to talk about probably right before the LCS, and then if we're lucky, before the World Series. I've got some travel, though, coming up, so that second podcast could be delayed till after the World Series. We'll see what happens. But Eric, you got anything?
No, let's just enjoy this month of baseball stress-free. That is the one thing I do like when my team is not in the playoffs, is that I don't know about you, but when the Giants are in the playoffs, I schedule around the Giants playoff games.
Yes.
And those are the only ones I care about, too. I don't watch the American League when that happens. I barely watch the other series because so much energy is focused on the Giants. So let's just enjoy this for what it is and hope that next year we can have stress again. This should be a good playoffs. There's a lot of good teams in the American League. The National League seems to have teams that are pretty even. So I don't have anything personally to pimp. Oh, I shared on the TortureCast Twitter, MLB put a video out today about getting rid of the unwritten rules. And if you get a chance to watch it, it is absolutely fire, talking about the young kids in the game. And it shows why I think this year's playoffs should be pretty exciting.
That's awesome. All right, well, for Eric, this is Chad signing off for episode 156. Enjoy the playoffs, everyone, and we'll see you again for episode 157. A boom.
A big thank you to everybody for listening to the TortureCast, the podcast by and for fans of the San Francisco Giants. Follow us on Twitter at TortureCast. You can also like us on Facebook or check out our blog at torturecast.com. I also want to say thank you to Ashcon and Bailey for letting us use their song Feeling Like a Giant for our intro. For Ben Lee and Chad King, my name is Willie Dills saying, we'll see you next time.